one database to rule them all. Anyway, hi. Back to it again. ENMU, IS 301, Yahoo, IS for managers. Today we're going to talk about a little bit of the players who tend to be involved in your database world. Outside the end user, I didn't put the end users in here. Sorry to say it. Let me say one thing about end users, though. You'll find some are really interested and even get involved in some of these roles. I put up here the Prima Donnas because that's what Gretchen, our office manager, which is always a title that never really describes fully what these people do. That's what she calls the people upstairs at the University Computer Center. Us high and mighty folk, and if you've listened to very many of my videos, you go, he isn't very high and he isn't very mighty, and you go, I think you've got that nailed. Anyway, these are what Gretchen would call the prima donnas. These are just generic roles. Like in the case of here at Eastern New Mexico University, we don't have 4 different people who can work on the database. Just don't have the money, don't have the manpower to make that happen. So we tend to have to divide up these roles however we can. The database administrator is the person that kind of takes care of the underlying stuff, backups, restorations, making sure the thing just keeps running. And that job usually falls to me. And it's okay. I do have help, and I'm grateful, always grateful for that kind of help. I end up being the plumber, and some days are better than others for being the plumber of the database, just keeping everything flowing. I like how it puts it as the person that waves a magic wand. It's kind of an interesting job because you get blamed for everything that goes badly and that doesn't really work very well, but you also get to be the great wizard that pulls rabbits out of the hat all the time. Now I'm starting like a magician. I'm mixing my metaphors. Pardon me. Well, anyway, that's a database administrator. Then you actually have a data administrator. This is kind of a new role. It used to be this was the database administrator too. They kind of split it up because they saw that somebody needed to be actually in charge of making sure the data was okay. There's certain aspects, and each one these four roles aren't really silos at all. You have to assume responsibility for the other roles just as readily. And you have to be sure that you're taking what is being done by somebody else in another role into account. Because one of the big ways that you make sure that the data in your database is accurate is that you have good forms, which is your data input. Let's not get into the fact that some of these things don't stay very clear. One thing about programming you got to know is that even if you start out with really well-defined roles and straight lanes for goals and for people and for everything else, once you start racing for the actual finished solution, everything just kind of gets thrown at just getting the solution done. And in some ways, that's a bad thing because you end up, not keeping stuff clearly delineated. But on the good side, you get the finished product and it's there and it's ready to be sold, or it's ready to be presented to your users, or however you put that across. At a certain point, you just need to drive it through. And that's often the role of the manager in all these things, is to make sure that things get done, and they get done within a reasonable period of time. Perfection is always a wonderful goal, but since we don't really have time for perfection, we have to just do the best we can with what we have available to us, and we've got to make things get there. So they've got to work. And that's where we rely on managers. You guys, the things that we're studying about here, the role you may hope to fulfill one day. It's not pretty. It's kind of dirty sometimes, but it gets the job done. And often that's exactly what's needed. Anyway, so you've got a database administrator. I talked about them. The data administrator, we didn't talk about them at all, but you can take a look. This is really the guy that makes sure that everything's clean and good. And, if you think of it like plumbing, which is not a bad idea at all, where the database administrator, me, is the plumber, the database administrator is the guy that makes sure that your water's clean, make sure that your water stays pure. Sometimes me as a plumber, I just want to get things hooked back up again, and I don't care about the water. I care about the conduit. I can, you've probably seen somebody work in your on your street, dig up that road and work on the sewer pipe or the water pipe, one or the other. And all they're really concerned about is just getting that stuff hooked back up so they can get their job done. They can go home to their families, because they're going to be out there for 10 hours trying to make this crap work. But then at the end of the day, you turn on your faucet, right? And, it comes out all rusty. It spits. Blah, blah, blah. I don't know if you've had that experience, but if you have, you know it. And that's what a data administrator would be in this little analogy for data, is to make sure that you're still getting clean data. You want that water to come out and you want it to look good. You don't want people to go, oh, this water is disgusting. Oh, it doesn't matter how much plumbing you do and how good of a job you do plumbing. If the water coming out of it is all dirty and disgusting and gross and rusty and who wants it? So I guess you can make that analogy between the two. I don't have time, so the next video we're going to talk about the form report designer and the database designer. And so I hope you're having a good time. Everybody looks different in writing. If you've noticed, when I write to you people, sometimes I'm a little short, I'm a little strict. In the videos, you can say, oh man, he seems like a totally different guy. And you go, yeah, and because right now I'm not having to be a real stickler about your assignments in these videos. So I can be a totally different person. I can even be personable, maybe even funny. And in business communication, in emails and announcements and stuff like that, which I use willy-nilly sometimes, not that fun. But that's kind of what business communication sometimes is for. People are different in meetings or in gatherings than they will be in business communications. It's just one of the things of life. We might try to mix the two, and that's okay. But one of the goals of the class is to make sure that you can be a good and effective business communicator. Since this is such a text heavy, such a paper heavy class, because it's online, got to help you try to make the best use of business communication that you can. Sometimes it seems really formal and stiff, and that's just life. Anyway, so I hope that little tidbit here at the end isn't too off-putting. Next time we'll talk about form report designer and database designer.